Uh-oh. Alright, I promised Legal Immigrant that I would not make any more videos about the Venus Project, and I'm not going to, at least not for any time soon. But this is a video that has kind of been inspired by comments on my Venus Project videos, but I am just going to address a more general topic. It applies to the Venus Project, but applies to most ideologies on the left, maybe all ideologies on the left, and that is some of the pretty evident contradictions between the concepts of egalitarianism and the concept of needs, or the provision of needs. You know, there's the famous Marxist dictum that to each according to his ability, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And then there's this very pervasive, I would say, universally accepted premise among the left of egalitarianism. Although exactly what they mean by egalitarianism is not always the same. Somewhere in there is certainly the rhetoric and even the policy decisions based on that rhetoric of egalitarianism. Now, both of those concepts have lots of problems involved in them, especially if you're going to talk about applying them to a political system or an allocation of resources. Needs is something that most people tend to think of as being very straightforward and objective. But when you ask people to specify exactly what your needs are, I mean, they'll say things really general, like, well, you need food, and you need shelter, and you need education, and you need health care. Depends who you ask, you'll get a different list. But none of those things are specific goods or specific resources or suggest a particular production model. They are really general categories. That's like saying happiness or you know, satisfaction or something. If you get right down to it, you know, how much caviar are you allowed to have? How much steak? How much of any particular? Do you need chicken? Do you need? Every different leftist or socialist that you ask will give you different answers when you get to specifics. You know, how much living space does everyone need? A Taj Mahal, or does everyone just need a hammock or a bunk bed, or do they need to share a bed with a? They never give the same answer, which is a pretty good indication that it's not some kind of objective science of what your needs are. And I've made videos on this. They're among my least viewed videos, but I have one on there called Needs. But basically, needs are derived from values which are subjective and they're individual. So if I value the thrill of excitement of being a daredevil greatly more relative to other people, then I'm willing to do things, that I need to do things that other people would never do, like skydive or bungee jump or deep sea dive is an example I really like. You know, these are things that risk your health, risk your life, but people do them anyway, quite voluntarily, quite explicitly. And that's just one example. Riding a motorcycle is a less dramatic but similar principle difference. You know, if you are a gourmet chef, or you really like to cook, you may be willing to be satisfied with less health in order to have more enjoyment through eating. And there's no objective way, at least currently, to say that's wrong. You know, your health is supposed to be this. And I mean, even there, you know, just referring back, you know, someone in the previous comments kept saying a particular YouTube user, for which my subscribers have heard me interact with many times, was saying, well, you know, you should reach your health optimum. Well, if I want to be a marathon runner or a bodybuilder, those are totally different optimums that imply totally different diets, lifestyles, and resource allocations. You know, if you want to be a marathon runner, you're going to have to eat different. You're going to have different kinds of shoes and different types of clothes. You're going to have to be in a different type of environment. You're going to have a different type of workout routine. And whereas if you want to be a bodybuilder, it's different. I mean, I have a friend in Iceland who was a power lifter for a long time. He got to the point where he was pretty good for an amateur. I think he could deadlift like 750 pounds, you know, from the ground, not over his head, but like, you know. And then he hurt himself, and he decided to become a bodybuilder instead, so he wouldn't have to be lifting such enormous weights all the time. And I asked him how much of a transition was, because from my perspective, there wouldn't be much of one. He says it's totally different. It's every day in the morning, the routine is completely different. What he eats, when he works out, how he works out, completely different. And the resource allocation for the various fulfillments is not the same. So unless we develop an objective theory of value, which, who's to say in science fiction might someday have the ability to, read our minds and say, the best thing for you is this or that, and have a metric to measure it, which currently does not exist, even hypothetically. We don't have an objective type of needs. Now, egalitarianism has its own problems. People are not the same. They are not equivocations of each other. In every physical, measurable sense that we have, no two humans are the same. Even identical twins have differences. If in the past, people would say identical twins, that's a sign of the imprecision of observation of their bodies, of their physical being, not an indication of their actual state, because we've since discovered that's not the case. Even people, even hypothetically, if there were clones, if they were identical people, their sensory experiences would be different over the course of their lives. Even if they lived together, they'd have different perspectives. Their brains would become wired differently as such. They would have different physical experiences, and they would develop differently, and they would not be the same. But most people are considerably more variant than that. In every measurable sense, in your height, in your weight, in your complexion, and the retort is, well, we're all human. Well, sure, that means that we share certain similarities, but let's not jump to equivocation here. And of course, there's the famous Rothbard essay, egalitarianism as a revolt against nature. It's clearly, when we're talking about politics or voting or work sites, no two people are equally qualified or equally interested or equally trustworthy to participate. No, I mean, there are some people who have invested a lot more mental and physical capital. There are some people who care more for whatever reason. And it makes no sense to just grossly simplify things and just say that they all should have equal based on what? Nothing. So both concepts are problematic in their own sense, especially when you try and devise a political system based on one or the other. But what's interesting is these two concepts are usually both held by leftists. I don't think I've ever met a leftist that didn't really hold both. Maybe sometimes on the need, obviously on what people they think they need varies quite a bit. And like I said, what they perceive as egalitarianism varies. Some people want egalitarianism of ends, and others just want egalitarianisms of means. So, some egalitarians want all of us to have the same income, but others think that we should all just have the same amount of education, and if someone gets more or less income, that's up to them. So there are differences, but most of them have both of these concepts. And I think it's interesting because unless you do really, really weird backflips and twisty curls and all kinds of philosophical and metaphysical twister matches, these two concepts do not really mesh together at all. I brought this up in my latest video about the certain utopian society that shall not be named, and he was saying, well, everyone should get what they need. And I said, given the fact that people are not identical, that they have very different body types, and that they have even more profound different goals, different physical needs when it comes to the fulfillment of their human essence, it is erroneous to think that they're going to have identical resource requirements. So if everyone is going to get their needs met, then not everyone's going to get an equal allocation of resources. They're going to get rather unequal allocations of resources. In fact, potentially radically different resource allocations. And whatever you want to call that, egalitarianism is not what comes to mind. And this is true even with really basic things like food. Bigger people have bigger appetites. I'm 6'1", so I'm not super tall, but I'm taller than most women, so I need a bigger bed, I need more clothing, I need bigger shoes, I need taller doorways, I need more energy and calories just to keep my body warm. So I'm going to consume a whole lot more than someone who's a foot smaller than I am. And I'm by no means the tallest person around, not even close. And that's just the beginning. In terms of our brains are similar in many, many ways, to the point where a surgeon can do surgery on someone, but not to the point that what we desire to fulfill our humanity is the same. If someone wants to be a figure skater and another person wants to raise ponies, well, the resource allocations for fulfilling either of those are not identical. In fact, they could be radically different. There are people who are satisfied playing chess and who get a lot of, like, become very, very satisfied from playing chess. All right, there are other people who aren't satisfied unless they're climbing Mount Everest or driving a high-end sports car or skydiving or fucking a lot of women or whatever. And the response I was given is, what's your basis for assuming that the resource allocations would be different for the various needs people have? I think it's because it's completely obvious that people are different. If we look in all of history, when people are given the choice to fulfill their desires, they don't all choose the same thing. I'm talking any society at any point. Now you can argue, well, there's some constraints or whatever, but like middle class people in the United States don't all have identical views on what they should do, in their free time or as their life's work. I have friends. What do they like to do? They like to drink beer, they like to play ping pong, and they like to snowmobile. Okay, I don't like to drink beer. Ping pong's fun, but and I'd like to start snowmobiling, but I don't currently. Or others who like to ride horses or run farms. They like to jog. Who knows? I like to swim. I grew up in swimming pools, and if I had my way, I would own an Olympic-sized swimming pool with a nice communal shower section. But so and we go all through history. Not everyone spent their time and their resources in the Middle Ages, in the classical period, on the same things, whether in whatever class we're talking about. The royalty don't all do the same thing. The middle class don't all do the same thing. The poor don't all do the same thing. There are poor people who like to spend all their time playing dice. There are poor people who like to spend all their time, doing drugs or, reading. A lot of people like to read, and these things don't entail an identical number of resources, and actually to optimize, if we're talking about that unnamed system, to have a production, a capital stock that ideally serves one is not going to ideally serve another. So if we have a capital base designed to fulfill the person who likes to figure skate or skydive, it's not going to be ideally set up for the person who wants to raise ponies or be an architect. I mean, and it's not even binary, because there's as many ideal human fulfillments as there are humans, and so there's probably enough similarity with some of them that we don't literally have to say that there's billions of ideal systems, but really that's the only really, really honest answer. And so no single system is going to be ideal for everybody. And it certainly is not going to give everyone the same resources, even if it gave them everything that they wanted, which of course no system can do, regardless of the fact that many people convince themselves otherwise. So, and this comes into a question of fairness. Why should one person just be given vastly more or vastly less resources than another? Especially if there's no connection to inputs, which is the Marxist idea. What you get is not what you put in. And this is the idea of most regular leftists. What you get from the welfare state or society in general has no connection to what you give. In fact, it's often an inverse connection. The less you give to society, the more you're entitled to get. Although in practical effect, the state is always subsidizing those with the most means. The billionaires and millionaires get way more subsidy than the people on welfare. But that's a slightly different topic here. But even if, it's pretty evident, human history has demonstrated that human needs go way beyond 3 hots and a cot. If all it took to satiate the essence of humanity, then, and I think I've said this before, we would not be having this conversation on YouTube. I would not have a webcam. We would be naked and hairy and picking lice off of each other's backs, because at that point we were getting all the food we needed and the appropriate amounts of sexual intercourse to perpetuate the species and resist entropy one more generation. But we have gone way, way, way past that. Now, the Discovery Channel has made an extremely biased, pro-state, pro-government piece of propaganda called Mankind, the Story of Us. The first episode of which I got for free. I was at a Barnes & Noble buying a whole bunch of Rimsky-Korsakov and Vivaldi, and they were giving them out for free, so I took one. And I watched the first episode, and I mean, the blatant state worship there is just, it literally makes you want to puke. But there was something in there that was true, and that is the idea that humans are not satisfied with their basic needs, their caloric intake, or the amount of exercise need to stem atrophied, or whatever other things that keep animals in zoos from going crazy. Humans strive for much, much more than that, and there is no limit. There is no physical limit on the number of goods that humans could conceptually desire to use and put to use in the fulfillment of their human essence. I'm not talking about, oh, this is just graft and greed and some vice. I'm talking about people have ambition to accomplish things, and there is no limit to that demand, none. And to say, oh, anything above a certain point, that's just aberrant. That is to deny. That is to ignore the genius that is humanity. That is, it's our greatest characteristic. It's the one thing that's going to guarantee that something from this planet survives past the time of the destruction of our sun. If there's any hope of that ever happening, it's because humans strive for more than equilibrium within the environment, which actually animals don't even strive for. They're just incapable of getting past that. So this kind of last part here is kind of giving up. But the point is, no system that is geared towards providing people with what they, quote, need. I mean, you could say we're going to give everybody the same thing, but that is not an honest or serious discussion of what each person needs, because there is differentiation there. To pretend otherwise is rank equivocation. It's complete injustice. It's totally erroneous. It's disgusting, and it's the source of untold suffering around the world. So if you're going to give everybody what they need, any honest attempt at that is going to have to individualize what that is, and that's not going to be equal. It's not going to be equal in time or labor or energy or in resources. And that is not going to be egalitarian. So anyone who's holding both of these concepts, I'd love to see them merge them together. I think some of the egalitarian stuff, if you make it vague enough, you can make it so if your egalitarianism has no implications in terms of allocation of resources, then it would mesh together. But anything where you start talking about egalitarianism that has some kind of relevance, or in terms of physical allocation of goods, then all of a sudden these you're not being able to square that hole. These pegs don't match together. Now, I think this is pretty obvious, but most of the people who hold these ideas do not have a coherent philosophy. It's just, this makes me feel good, so I accept this. This also makes me feel good, so I accept this. This makes me feel good, so I accept this. I'm interested in this, and so I'm incorporating that as also. And I watched this 3-hour documentary, which convinces me that I know everything about every topic that I need to know in order to recommend that everyone on the entire planet be forced to submit to this idea. And I'm not just talking about what everyone thinks I'm talking about. I'm talking about every kind of leftist utopianism that has been the blight of the 20th century in humanity from the time that they were first thought up. So this video is going to be pretty short. It's under 20 minutes, but I just wanted to put that out there, that I think that these two ideas, if you ever encounter somebody who's incorporating both of these ideas, they clearly are not compatible, unless, of course, you're getting to the point where you make one or the other so vague as to have no application to resources, which is not the point. I mean, the point of them having them is to argue for some kind of rationing of resources based upon egalitarianism or needs, or one of, but not both, because I don't think that's possible. Or if someone thinks that is possible, I know I have some anarcho-syndicalists who watch this, anarcho-pack. I don't know if you use these ideas or not. I've never seen you in a video say it, so I'm not strawmanning you because I don't even know if you hold that position. But I'd love to see you square the circle, or somebody. If only to see some really cool gymnastics in the process.